Hello and welcome to this little video where I'm going to be talking through the pressure performance curve. This is the third video that I've done in relation to mentoring. This model, though, actually isn't just about mentoring. It is a useful tool to bring into mentoring conversations, but you can use it in lots of different ways with teams, more in a coaching space than in a mentoring space. It's a really versatile little tool that you can use, again, in lots of different ways. And I think it always facilitates a useful conversation. So it begins with this question, working under pressure. What's the right amount of pressure to be working under? Certainly not none. If you've ever worked in an environment where there's no pressure or expectation, that doesn't necessarily facilitate a good performance from people. In fact, quite the opposite. But likewise, too much. And again, our performance at work as well as our motivation can diminish and dwindle, possibly even worse than that. So this is the little tool, the pressure performance curve, based on the work of Williams, this version. Actually, really is a question that people have been looking at since the 1930s. People like Hans Selye, again, who was sort of interested in this idea about can there be good stress? What Williams suggests is that there's perhaps an optimal point, and after that, we're into diminishing returns. So on our x-axis down at the bottom, we've got the amount of pressure that we are under. The y-axis along the side there, performance. That would, I suppose, incorporate the quality of the work that we're doing, and also the motivation that we bring to it. Those two things probably correlated. So along the bottom there, if we've got the absence of any pressure, the boredom zone. And if you've ever worked in an environment where there's no expectations, targets, deadlines, that sort of thing, not great for you as an individual. It's sort of very difficult to motivate yourself, I think, for many people. Organizational culture also can suffer there. Is when things become, I think, a bit political. There could be a bit of inward focus. People can spend an awful lot of time sending emails and thinking about their careers and those sorts of things rather than the real world problems that we need to be solving. So not great for the individual or the organization, the boredom zone. As pressure builds, we can see performance jumps up quite quickly with it. So as we go into the comfort zone there, we're definitely not bored, we're engaged and we're focused. The curve sort of tails off a little bit, so that suggests that there is sort of a point where it doesn't always correlate consistently. So pressure keeps building, we're still in the comfort zone. Here we're in control, top end of comfort, you're in control, you know what you're doing, but you're definitely having to pay attention. But then we get into the stretch zone. So this is where pressure keeps on going. Now, stretch is where we're not comfortable anymore, by definition, and we are stretched by definition. This is where we need to pay attention. We're possibly in the realm of making mistakes. This is, we might need to do some learning, and again, it's not going to be intuitive to do that because if you're under a lot of pressure, taking the time out to actually think about your own skills and capabilities and resources isn't always the natural thing to do, but it's the thing that we should do. The thing that I notice about myself here is that I do stop communicating so much. I can become a little bit introverted, kind of focused on the challenge, which isn't the best thing if you need to collaborate your way through the challenge. So self-awareness here is really important. But fundamentally, a bit of time stretch can be positive because it's where we're having to learn. There's also maybe where we're kind of making real progress. This suggests that we're really pushing ourselves, which again can, under the right conditions and with the right support, be a very healthy place to be. However, pressure keeps building. Now, the dotted line is fantasy land. That's what doesn't happen. We might think that it will, but it absolutely doesn't. The blue line there, as it drops off a cliff, is what happens in reality. So performance starts to dip initially in strain. This is where we start to make mistakes. Quality of work will suffer. And we might start to question ourselves. Sort of people can start to lose their self-confidence in that place. You may have experienced that. And as we keep on going, possibly all the way into that place of panic, or sort of high levels of stress, particularly over time, fatigue, poor performance, ill health. So I think that the ill health point is when we find ourselves working in that space for weeks, going into months. You can probably see it in people, they just look tired, they're not sleeping right, they're taking their worries home, so it impacts their home life as well, and we can get into a really negative spiral. Little short periods of time in that place of stress are manageable. That's life. Life throws you these things. I mean, I experienced it watching Saltburn with my in-laws, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. But if it's if we find that we're there a lot, then, certainly going into months, then that can be really quite complex for mental and physical health. So how do we use this? You could say, well, an optimal place is in that place of sort of kind of moving between comfort and stretch. So periods of time and stretch balanced against time in comfort where we can recover, a little bit like building a muscle in the gym. You can lift heavy weights, but then you need to give that muscle a bit of time off. If you try to lift heavy weights all the time, you're likely to actually just end up with an injury. And so it is with the mind. The mind's a little bit like that. So we can push ourselves for periods of time, but then it's just making sure we balance that against time back in the comfort zone where we're able to reflect, recuperate, maybe garner our resources, and then we're ready to go again. So it's that sort of zigzag, that kind of balance between stretch and comfort for most people is probably the best place to be, certainly if we want to work in a way that's going to be over the long term. And if we want to kind of deliver a good level of performance consistently over time, that we could say that perhaps could be a goal for ourselves and our teams. Here are just a few questions that we can use, again, one-to-one or with groups. Where are you at the moment? So where would people put themselves on this model? And that can be quite hard to articulate in words, but asking people perhaps to point or to put an X marks the spot sort of thing might help people to kind of clarify in their own minds how they feel about their work at the moment. What factors are contributing to that? And again, what? So if people are not in a good place in particular, you can say, well, why? What's going on there? What are the contributing factors? Because relating to then that third question, well, sometimes it could be work stuff, want to work, that type of thing, but it could also be contributing factors. Could also be what's happening at home. People don't always, tell you about that. But it's definitely the case that if people have a stressful situation, if they're under a lot of pressure at home, that will directly impact the amount of change, pressure, and challenge that they're going to be able to cope with effectively at work. And then moving into actions. So what changes would you like to make? What would you like to be different? If again, people aren't where they would like to be, or of course, if they are where they'd like to be, how do we keep them there? Because again, it is fluid, and as people learn new things, that actually what might have kind of kept you really engaged previously won't always keep you engaged. If you do something 100 times, you get really, really good at it. It's sort of we might be looking for the next challenge. So what changes would you like to make to kind of keep yourself engaged, to kind of keep you in that positive place? And then what's directly in your control? And there are always things which are in your control. Sometimes as well, this could be about our perception about things. It's sort of how much of the stress or pressure that we're under is actually just down to our own expectations, the inability to say no, for example, or push back on certain things, or to negotiate different deadlines. So there are usually things which are in our control to change. There may be things, contributing factors which are outside of our control and that we have to respond to. Well, then it might be again about finding the right support for ourselves so that we can do that. There are always things which are in our control, and that's probably a healthy question to end with. What is in your control, and what can you how can you take a positive step here to make sure that you're working in a way which is sustainable over time? There we go. So Pressure Performance Curve, great little tool to facilitate conversations. If you enjoyed that, please follow the channel. I'm going to be sharing more things like this. And thank you very much for watching this little video.